Welcome to Pillow Time Lore, where dreams take shape and stories wrap around you like your favorite blanket. You've made it through the day, and now it's time to slow down, breathe deeply, and drift into a world made just for you. So, fluff up your pillow, snuggle into your coziest spot, and let your eyes get heavier with each word. This is your moment. No to-do lists, no noise, just stillness and a little magic. With each breath in, feel the tension melt from your shoulders. With each breath out, let go of everything that doesn't serve your peace. You're safe here. Tonight's story is soft and soothing, like a warm cup of tea for your thoughts, carefully crafted to calm your busy mind and help you drift gently into sleep. So close your eyes, dear dreamer. Let your imagination wander while I carry you into a land where anything is possible and everything ends in peace. This is Pillow Time Lore. Leo felt a bit like a ghost in the quiet old house. After moving from a noisy city, the small coastal town was a new world for him. His grandfather, who had lived in this house his whole life, had passed away years ago, and Leo had never had the chance to meet him. Now, Leo's family was living here, surrounded by the man's memories and belongings. The house itself felt heavy with them, the smell of old books and wood, the soft light that came through the windows, and the deep quiet that made Leo feel a little lost. Most days, Leo would sit in the living room, feeling like a visitor, but one afternoon, feeling especially bored and lonely, he decided to do what any curious boy would do. He went exploring. He pushed open the creaky door to the attic, and a cloud of dust swirled into the air. The attic was a treasure trove of forgotten things, old trunks, a rocking horse missing its tail, and stacks of yellowed books. It was a place full of stories he couldn't hear. He moved through the sea of forgotten objects, his fingers tracing the dust on a wooden box tucked away in a dark corner, half covered by a thick blanket. He found it. It was a camera, but unlike any he had ever seen. It wasn't sleek and modern like his dad's. It was old and beautifully made, with a body of worn, dark leather and a worn strap. The lens was intricate, a small, polished eye staring out at him. He carefully picked it up, brushing the dust away. The moment his fingers wrapped around the camera's body, he felt it. Not a magical hum or a mysterious glow, but a strange warmth that spread from the cold leather to his palm. It was the feeling of a story waiting to be told, a whisper from the past. He didn't know how, but holding the camera made him feel like he was finally meeting his grandfather, a man who had loved this town and this house so much. This old, quiet camera wasn't just a thing. It felt like a friend, a connection to a life he wished he had known. With the camera in his hands, the house didn't feel so lonely anymore. Holding the old leather camera, Leo felt that faint warmth and a new sense of purpose. The house didn't seem so quiet now. It felt like it was humming with a secret. As he ran his fingers over the worn leather case, he discovered a small, hidden pocket on the inside flap. Tucked snugly inside was a small, faded journal, bound in the same soft leather as the camera. He opened it carefully, and the pages rustled softly, smelling of old paper and dust. The handwriting inside was his grandfather's, neat and slanted, just like the notes his dad had showed him. But these weren't ordinary notes. The pages were filled with beautiful, detailed sketches of the town, not just of buildings, but of small, forgotten nooks and crannies. Next to the drawings were short, cryptic notes, like little whispers from the past. Leo was holding a treasure map to his own new home. The first entry was a simple drawing of the old lighthouse at the edge of the cliffs, its spiral shape sketched in careful lines. Beside it, in his grandfather's handwriting, were just a few words. Look where the light touches the sea, and see what the camera sees. Leo felt a thrill run through him. The camera wasn't just a relic. It was a tool, and the journal was its guide. He realized his grandfather hadn't just lived in this town. He had loved its every secret, every forgotten story. He wasn't just telling Leo where to go. He was inviting him on an adventure. The loneliness he had felt melted away, replaced by a quiet excitement. He wasn't just a boy in a new house anymore. He was a detective, a keeper of secrets. He looked out his bedroom window toward the sea in the distance. He could see the white spiral of the old lighthouse, standing tall against the blue sky. It looked different to him now, not just a landmark but the starting point of his own journey. He held the journal in one hand and the camera in the other. They fit together perfectly, a puzzle with 1,000 pieces waiting to be found. Leo knew exactly where he had to go. With the camera strap around his neck and his grandfather's journal tucked into his pocket, Leo walked to the edge of town, where the old lighthouse stood tall against the sky. The air was fresh and salty, and the sound of seagulls filled the quiet afternoon. He felt a mix of excitement and nerves, his heart beating like a drum. The lighthouse, with its peeling white paint and steep, winding steps, felt like a sentinel of the past, a silent keeper of the town's stories. Leo found the exact spot his grandfather had drawn in the journal. He held the old camera up, its leather body cool in his hands. He felt a sudden shiver of doubt, a fear that nothing would happen, that the warmth he felt was just his imagination. He took a deep breath and clicked the shutter. The old camera made a soft, satisfying sound, and a small, square photo slid out of the side. He watched in awe as the blank paper slowly began to fill with an image. First, the stone of the lighthouse appeared, then the vast blue of the ocean, but then something else began to form, a ghostly shape standing on the steps. It was a man, faint and transparent like a memory, but his smile was clear and kind. It was his grandfather. The photo wasn't just a picture of the lighthouse. It was a picture of a moment, an echo of a time when his grandfather stood in that exact spot. Leo felt a tear escape and roll down his cheek. The camera wasn't just old, it was a window to the past. It didn't capture light, it captured memories. His grandfather was there with him after all. Leo stared at the picture of his grandfather, a mix of wonder and disbelief swirling inside him. He felt an urge to share this incredible secret, but also a fear that no one would believe him. The kids in his new town already thought he was the quiet, shy boy from the city. How could he show them a photo with a ghost in it? But then he remembered Maya, a local girl he'd seen often in the town library. She was always reading old books and seemed to love stories about the town's past. He felt a flicker of hope that she might understand. With his heart pounding, he found her by the town square, sketching the old buildings. He took a deep breath and showed her the photo. Maya's eyes grew wide, but not with fear. They shone with pure fascination. "This is amazing," she whispered, her finger tracing the faint shape of his grandfather. "It's not a ghost, Leo. It's a memory. It's a part of our town's history that was almost forgotten." Her belief was a huge wave of relief that washed over him. Maya, a true history enthusiast, was immediately on board. "Your grandfather was a collector of stories," she said with a bright smile, "and this camera is his way of telling them to you." Together, they looked at the journal. The next page had a drawing of the town's tall, old clock tower, with a note that simply said, "Listen for the sound of time's song with Maya as his new partner." Leo no longer felt lonely. The quiet, old house wasn't just a place of memories for him anymore. It was the starting point of an adventure. They looked up at the clock tower, its hands moving slowly. They knew their next clue was waiting for them there, hidden in the chimes of the bells. With a new friend by his side, the quiet town didn't seem so big anymore. Leo and Maya walked together, their footsteps echoing on the cobblestone streets as they headed toward the town's tall, old clock tower. It stood like a giant's monument, its weathered stone and copper roof looking down on everything. They could hear the gears ticking inside, a constant, gentle heartbeat for the whole town. The climb up the winding wooden stairs was dusty and exciting. Each step creaked under their weight, and the air smelled of old wood and forgotten time. They finally reached the top, where the giant, gleaming copper bells hung silent and still, waiting for the hour. They were bigger than Leo had imagined, their surfaces etched with the names of long-gone clockmakers. Leo took out the camera, his hands feeling steady this time. He knew what he was looking for now. He held the camera up, aiming its special lens at the biggest bell with a soft click. A new photo slid out as it developed. A picture of the bell appeared, but something more was there. It wasn't a shadow this time, but a faint, glowing line of symbols on the bell's surface. A line of strange little dots and lines that looked like musical notes. Maya gasped. "It's a secret inscription. Your grandfather must have known about it." They looked at the picture, and then at the bell itself. The symbols were completely invisible to them, just a flat copper surface. The camera was more than just a window to the past. It was a key that could unlock secret messages. The song from the bells was not a sound, but a code, and the old camera was the only way to read it. They had found their next piece of the puzzle, and with it, a whole new mystery to solve together. Leo and Maya took the picture of the bell's hidden inscription to the town's library. It was a beautiful old building, filled with the quiet rustle of turning pages and the smell of old paper. Maya, who seemed to know every book and every corner, led them to the dusty archives in the back. The song from the bell, she explained, was actually a clue that pointed to a specific part of the library. Just as her grandfather's notes had hinted, there, among forgotten books and rolled-up maps, they found a large, faded sea chart. It was a map of their own coast, drawn long ago. Maya's eyes lit up. This must be it. Leo took out the camera, his hands feeling steady and sure. He aimed the lens at the chart, the worn leather a familiar comfort in his hands. The camera clicked, and another photo slid out. As it developed, they saw not just the old map, but a hidden symbol glowing faintly in the corner, a small, five-pointed star with a broken line. Maya gasped in excitement. That's the symbol of Captain Sterling. He's the forgotten sea captain who founded our town. But all his records were lost. The two of them looked at the symbol, feeling the thrill of discovery. Leo's grandfather hadn't just been interested in secret places, he had been piecing together a lost part of their town's history. The camera was a key to a much bigger story than they had ever imagined. A story of a brave captain and a town that had forgotten its own beginning. Leo and Maya looked at the photo of Captain Sterling's symbol, a feeling of wonder growing inside them. They realized that the camera's special power wasn't just showing them echoes of the past. It was revealing forgotten truths. His grandfather wasn't just a man who lived in the quiet house. He was a silent historian, a keeper of the town's lost stories. The camera was his tool, a way to collect these invisible clues and secrets. He was piecing together a puzzle for us, Maya said, her eyes shining with excitement. He knew these stories would be lost, so he made a way for them to be found. Leo felt a surge of pride and connection to the grandfather he'd never met. He wasn't just a stranger's name in a journal. He was a clever and caring man who had left a path for Leo to follow. He was no longer a lonely boy in a quiet house. He was on an adventure with a purpose. Together, they turned to the next page in the journal. It was a beautiful, detailed sketch of an overgrown path leading to a small, forgotten park. The note beside it read, "Where love's promise was kept." The town had many parks, but this one didn't look familiar to Maya, a girl who knew every corner of her home. They set out to find it, using the sketch as their guide. After searching for a while, they finally pushed aside some thick ivy. At the edge of the woods, and found it, a small, peaceful park, its benches and paths now covered in moss. The discovery was like stepping into a hidden part of the past, and Leo knew his grandfather's next clue was waiting for them there. Pushing through the last of the thick ivy, Leo and Maya stepped into the small, overgrown park. It was a beautiful but forgotten place, its paths hidden under a soft carpet of moss and fallen leaves. Birds sang from the branches above, but the park felt silent and still, as if it had been waiting for them in the center. Under a sprawling old tree sat a single stone bench. It was weathered and worn, but looked strong and peaceful. "This must be it," Maya whispered, her eyes filled with wonder. Leo took out the camera. He no longer felt nervous. Instead, he felt a calm sense of purpose. He aimed the lens at the bench, focusing on the rough stone. With a soft click, a new photo slid out. As it developed, the image of the bench appeared. But just like before, there was a secret waiting to be found. Faintly glowing on the back of the bench was a small, hidden plaque. The photo made the words perfectly clear. "For Amelia, my anchor and my star, the world is built on your love." Leo and Maya gasped. The plaque wasn't for the sea captain, but for his wife. They realized that the story they knew was only half true. The town's founder wasn't just a brave, lonely hero. He was a man who built this entire town out of a deep and powerful love for his wife. This forgotten park was their secret place. The town's heart wasn't just a lost story of adventure, but a beautiful story of love. The camera had shown them not just a truth, but a feeling. They knew their adventure was nearing its end, and the final piece of the puzzle must be the most important one of all. Leo and Maya hurried back to the quiet house, their hearts full of the sea captain's love story. The house didn't feel so quiet anymore. It felt like a home filled with waiting secrets. They opened the journal to the last page. His grandfather's final note was simple, with a small sketch of the fireplace. The words were a soft, gentle whisper. "Home is where the heart is," with Maya standing beside him. Leo held the camera up to the old brick fireplace, its stones dark with years of forgotten warmth. He pressed the button, and the camera clicked one last time, a gentle sigh of an ending. As the photo developed, it showed the fireplace, but one of the bricks glowed faintly. It was a single, loose brick in the stone wall. Hidden from plain sight, a shiver of excitement ran through them with great care. They used the journal to gently pry the brick out. Behind it, nestled in a small alcove, was a beautifully carved wooden music box. It was old, but perfectly preserved, with delicate little carvings of a lighthouse and a ship. Leo carefully wound the small key on the side. The music box began to play. A beautiful, sweet melody filled the silent room. It was the song from the clock tower bells, the code they had found on the ancient sea chart. The tune wasn't just a code. It was a song of love, passed down through time. Leo and Maya understood everything now. The music box was the town's heart, a treasure his grandfather had found and carefully hidden to protect. It was his final gift to the town, a beautiful story for everyone to share, and the camera was his way of passing it on to his family. This wasn't just an adventure about a town's history, but a journey of love that had led Leo right back to his home. The next day, Leo and Maya gathered the townspeople in the square. Leo, once the shy boy from the city, stood beside his new friend, holding the music box and the collection of photos. With a newfound courage, he told them the story of the clock tower's song and the forgotten plaque in the park. As he spoke, Maya held up the photos, each one showing a different piece of the invisible puzzle. Then, with a reverent hush, Leo wound the music box. The beautiful, gentle melody filled the square, a song that had been silent for decades. The people were deeply moved, their faces filled with wonder and tears. They finally understood the full, beautiful story of their town's founding, not as a simple act of history, but as a deep love story. They thanked Leo and Maya, welcoming them into the heart of their community. Leo no longer felt like a boy in a quiet old house. He had found his place here. He had a friend in Maya, a partner in discovery. The quietness of the old house no longer felt lonely. It felt full of his grandfather's love and wisdom. He had uncovered a legacy, and in doing so, he had found his own. That evening, Leo stood at his window, looking out at the town he now knew so well. In his hand, he held the old camera. It was no longer just a camera, but a symbol of his journey, a connection to his grandfather, and a promise for the future. He felt the familiar warmth from its worn leather and knew that its magic wasn't gone. The whispers of the past, of love, and of adventure were now a part of him, his to keep and his to share. The boy who had arrived in a quiet house full of echoes had become the keeper of the town's most beautiful story. And he knew, with a quiet certainty, that this was just the beginning.